Welcome to Talking in Stations, a podcast about EVE Online. I am Matterall here with our group of friends, starting with Arsia. How are you doing?
Doing well, thank you.
Awesome. Arsia does role play, faction warfare, small gang, Edencom, and topics like that. She's very specialized in that, but she can talk about anything else as well. We have Caleb here with me. Caleb?
Hey, guys.
Caleb works on the overall humanities of EVE Online, economy issues, game design, and the ethereal topics. Also here is Elise Randolph.
Hey, how's it going?
Elise is, well, he's just a celebrity for being a celebrity these days, but he's also brilliant at history and mechanics and nullsec and all kinds of different things. There's nothing he can't talk about. Also, Hateless is here. Hateless, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Hello, guys.
Hateless is a master Care Bear. He is self-described that way, but he is what I keep calling the Mozart of missions, because he can orchestrate right through them at maximum capacity for income generation. And he also does a bunch of other things as well. So he knows a lot about everything that goes into it, like mechanics and related topics like Triglavians, incursions, and all that stuff. All right, and our engineer, Maccloud. Are you on cam, Maccloud?
I am on cam. Hi, everybody.
All right. A rare look at Maccloud on this show, but you can see him every Saturday on Push to Talk, right?
That is correct.
All right. First of all, happy holidays, guys. Thanks for being festive. We're running a little bit late because I had a dream that I was running with Obama on Hawaiian beaches. So, well, it wasn't just me and him. It was his entourage, too. Okay. Those are like cat streams, right? They're like the weirdest things ever. Okay. Let's talk about EVE Online. Something happened recently. Let's go from what happened recently, and we'll go back into the week a little bit, because most of the news actually happened earlier in the week. But right now, let's talk about the war. What's the latest there?
So there's actually been a lot of hot moments in the last couple days. The system of Null, which is like historically significant. It used to be one of the homes of Band of Brothers, and famously it was basically the capital of Delve for quite some time, where if you captured Null, you kind of had control over the region. That is no longer the case. Right now, it's just a normal system in Delve, but it is kind of centrally located.
Is that why it was the capital? Because it was centrally located, therefore you could jump all over it?
I think at the time it was just because the jump ranges were different than they are now. But yeah, I think it was easy to get to Empire, easy for logistics, and easy to like kind of go around everywhere.
Okay.
So that system, Pappy forces had gotten Solve 3 there, which indicates that they've controlled the region for, I think, 3-ish weeks, or controlled the system rather, for 3-ish weeks. So they can put up the iHub and the iHub upgrade of jamming the system, which means that they can siege the Keep Star there, which Imperium have, under a jammer. So it's kind of really hard to do anything without your capitals there. So one side gets capitals, the other side doesn't. Massive advantage. And that's been the Pappy strategy for dismantling these Imperium Keep Stars, is take the iHub, wait for 3 weeks, get a jammer, go siege the Keep Star. And so that's the process that's been going down in Null. The armor timer, there's a bit of a snafu for the armor timer, which was a very similar timer for the initiative's oh shit Fortizar timer, their staging timer in Curse, which is where they're deployed. So there was a bit of an overlap there, not quite exactly, but close enough. And there was a fight over the jammer in Null. And what that did is that distracted a lot of the Pappy forces that are still around Delve. It made sure that they had to prioritize either going after the oh shit thing or going after this Keep Star. And the people there, they decided to go after the Keep Star. So they secured the jammer, killed an Imperium fleet of Serbs and I think Munins, and they ended up getting that jammer secured, and that Keep Star is now into the final structure timer, which happens in roughly 2 days and some odd hours. It's actually a very USTZ focused final timer, which should be interesting for the Imperium because they're a little bit stronger there
in the US time zone.
Yeah. As a counterbalance to that, though, what ended up happening is the Initiative had an amazing showing in Oshit, which is they were fighting over their final timer for their staging Fortizar. They didn't really want to lose it. I'm sure Maccloud can attest that it wasn't like super important, but they would have rather not lost it. And because everyone else was busy fighting, the Pappy forces were split enough where the Initiative and their allies were able to, like the Imperium came in with some jackdaws to supplement them. They were able to defend their timer. They got a great bombing run off, ended up killing something like 60 or 70 legacy battleships in that bombing run. And they just prevailed, saved the timer. As you can see, Legacy focused more on the Del front than this. So this is a very good showing for the Initiative, who kind of just showed up in Curse and are doing what a lot of us had hoped they would do, which is create a lot of chaos, force people to make decisions, split forces a little bit. So I'm sure the Imperium are very, very happy with the result of this. Yes, their keeps are one of the final timer, but they had evidence that they can split Pappy forces enough where they can take one of the fights. So that was a very big development, and I think their Imperium are going to kind of leverage this a little bit more going forward. So that's really cool.
Yeah, so that strategy is showing real promise, I guess. The splitting up a Pappy, because let's face it, when you're fighting 2-1 in this game, it's very difficult to win in those conditions if everybody's equally talented, I guess. But if you can do anything to reduce that ratio to closer to a 1-1, you might have a fighting chance in that case.
Yeah, exactly. And so the Initiative were still outnumbered here, but they had a great bombing run, which really just turned the tide for them. I think their structure got into, I think their forces got into half structure or something. So it got close. It wasn't just like the Pappy forces showed up and were like, let's give this one. There was a fight over it. And they tried. They tried, yeah. And I'm sure they will keep trying again. They'll make another timer there. Because it's a sword that cuts both ways, right? So the Pappy people can now make double timers and make the Imperium choose which one they want to go to. So there's going to be a lot of gamesmanship over these structures here. But the Initiative has showed that they can do it. They can do everything they can there, and they're also I don't want to say ravaging catch, but they're ravaging catch right now. They're starting to burn some fields there. They're forcing a response. That's the important thing. They are forcing a response, whether or not they're having tremendous success. It doesn't really matter, even though they are. They are forcing a response. They're splitting forces a little bit, which is exactly what they wanted to do. This was their objective. And more importantly, their members are having a good time. You can see Pando playing some more FCing. He's one of the all-star FCs of the game. So getting him more involved in this conflict is hugely important, in my opinion. So I'm glad that he's doing that. That's not to say he was not involved before, right? But there's only so much like an FC of his talent and drive wants to do with the big fleets. He'd rather take on the more medium and smaller ones, which is what he's got the opportunity to do now, and he's really thriving there. So their members are getting way more invested. They're starting to show their pedigree a little bit more. So the Initiative, for all intents and purposes, have arrived in this war for sure, from a small hiatus after Fountain.
Yeah. Well, they had arrived early on in Fountain. They put up that brick wall that was really hard to get through before they decided to tactically retreat to Delve. So that was impressive when they first started out, and they're impressive again over there where the odds are. The odds are more favorable.
But Pappy have, in the Delve front, they are having some success as well. Like I said, Null, that Keepstar is now in the final timer. We might see a very interesting fight over it because it's so deep into US time zone and so close to Christmas that the numbers advantage might just slowly edge in the Imperium way. Or they might have a little bit of better advantage there because of the European time zone. is going to be probably fast asleep. And they might not necessarily want to stay up for that timer.
Yeah.
So we might get a fight there, which should be cool. Maybe not, though. It might just be a dismantling.
Did you say it was 2 a.m. for Europeans, that fight?
I think so. I think it's 2 a.m. Eve time. I'm not 100% sure with the timer. I remember seeing the timer and going like, oh, shit, that's late. It was like 3 days, 3 hours from when it was first put in there. So you're talking, if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, you're talking about forming at 1:30, forming at 1 o'clock, and then staying out till 3:34 to, even if it's uncontested. We did see a funny situation. NC Dot nearly lost to hell while sieging the Keepstar. The Keepstar was it was a manned Keepstar, but there was no real fleet there from the Imperium. They had some Dictors, but that's it. And an NC Hell, which was hyperspatial rigged, apparently, got into 2% structure before they were able to bomb the bubble off and warp it off. We were taking bets because we were all formed up on a Titan, seeing if the Imperium would do anything. And so we were all taking bets like, is he going to die? Someone was positioned. I don't want to say someone was positioned in prime position to loot his wreck, but someone was definitely positioned in prime position to loot his wreck. And that person may or may not have been me. But I was also there helping with bombs. So it counts, right? It counts as being a good ally. But yeah, he got off. He repaired. I'm sure his knuckles were a little bit white from that one. But that just goes to show you how powerful these Keepstars can be, right? Like you're talking about the most defensible structures in the game, and they've got a lot of firepower with them. That's why the Pappy forces go through so much effort when dismantling them and tearing them down. The Imperium call it the Doom Clock, right? The Doom Clock is when an iHub goes to Solve 3, which means it can be jammed. The next big system to come out is the iHub in DTAC W. I think the Doom Clock on there goes on just after Christmas. So that means that system can be sieged now. So you just see this very methodical, unending barrage of Pappy forces trying to just get a hold on some of these key systems and then taking down the Keepstars.
Yeah. How did the Keepstar defend itself against that hell? How did it get it all the way down to 2% structure?
Well, it wasn't super tanked, and I think the hell was a little bit out of position, so it got doomsdayed. And then the Keepstar was anti-cat fit, so it just started focusing on this guy. And then the Imperium pilots would send in some Dictors to suicide bubbles on it to keep it from warping off. And so every time it would get to the edge of a bubble, a new Dictor would appear. And so the guy was like, hey, this is starting to get worrisome. And of course, the jammer was online, so they couldn't just light a Sino and bring in Minakawas or something like that.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about the Doom Clock in just a second, but the Vince Draken lost a slaved pod, which is pretty expensive. It's probably what, 2 to 5 billion now? 2 to 5 billion?
I don't know, actually. Our slaves,
It might have gone down in price.
I think they're like 3 bill or so, yeah. But a lot of FCs tend to run, especially FCs that expect to get shot a lot, as Vince does. They definitely tend to overtank their ships, especially in those situations. And I think he didn't want to fly a Monitor because the Monitor has a weird interaction with Citadels because it's like very heavy.
A weird interaction with Citadels, you were saying? What's that?
How do you mean? Never heard of this.
So actually, before I say this, because I might sound really stupid, was he flying a Monitor when he lost his pod?
Oh, no, he was flying it. Sorry, he was flying what looks like a
TFI?
No, it was actually flying Dictor, I think.
Oh, okay.
So I think he put the wrong pod. Yeah, I think he put the wrong pod.
He's just dumb. Classic Vince Draken.
Yeah, I got you. You're looking for the strategy. No, I think he actually put the pod in the wrong ship because he maybe didn't have time for a costume change. So, and that ship got destroyed, and that pod then was. Yeah,
that's one of those real feel bad because you probably put a bubble up, you die, and then you die in your own bubble with your expensive.
He died in an anathema, so it was a Covops. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So he's just moving around. Poor.
Yeah. I think he was moving around.
That's the worst feel, and you notice right after it. But anyway,
I've lost similar pods to that, and it feels bad.
The Monitor has an odd interaction, and Headliner kind of goes off on tangents about this, and I'm sure Asher does as well. If you're flying in a hack fleet, the Monitor it gets targeted by a Keepstar Doomsday first. because it's because of its mass and it's everything like that. So the Doomsday, they have these like super tanked FC ships, and the Keepstar Doomsday focuses on them first, just because of some stats of the ship. Something that's been like a little bit overlooked.
Weird. Because they're supposed to be cruiser size. Their signatures are like that of a frigate. Like they're appear tiny and they're super like zoomed. So they're really difficult to get. The fact that it Keepstar just nukes it, you'd think that they'd look into that a little bit.
You would think so, but yeah. So that's why I assumed Vince lost his clones. I gave him way too much credit. He was just dumb and lost his ship.
I just heard about it before going on air too. It was a little blurb happened like 12 hours ago or something. Hey, Suitonia. Let me quickly introduce Suitonia. He'll come up in just a second. He is really, really deeply knowledgeable about mechanics and solo piloting, but also small gang and a number of things. But I want to welcome Suitonia to the program.
Hey, man.
Hey. And for as much flack as I give Vince for losing slate pods, he's probably the. You can make a case for another person, but I think you could say that Vince is the most experienced FC in the game in terms of just longevity. How long he's played at a high level. He's been around through every war. He's played a huge role in every war. So he's definitely goes down in Eve's history books. You could almost make the case for DBRB, but DBRB has had moments of absence, and same for Villy, but he's had a couple years where he's been inactive. I don't think Vince has ever really missed a big event, especially when it comes to goons, right? So he's always been there at an extremely high level. I love Vince. He's one of my favorite people in the game.
Yeah, he's not somebody that's been around. He's somebody that's shaped what's happened too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Making decisions on what the group would do, one of the most powerful groups would do. And he goes back to like Doom. I don't know what he did before Doom, but I think he actually was in DICE at one point. But yeah, we should talk about him a bit because he's such a extraordinary Eve leader. He's the leader now of NC Dot. He pretty much formed it up himself. I don't know if he even shared that with anyone except maybe Wicked Princess, which he kicked to the curb during Dot Bros a long time ago. We won't get into that. But all right, yeah. So there's a lot to be said about Vince and his impact on the game and stuff, which is cool. Maybe we'll actually talk about that later on when we talk about the most influential player according to TIS for the year in EVE Online. All right, Suitonia, good to see you, buddy.
Yeah, sorry for being late. I had a good fight with Volta. We fought against Vandalogs and Siberian squads, and we kind of dunked them, but then they called snuff, so it ended up being about IS positive, but we fought 2-1, and they had like 40 caps versus R2, so it worked out pretty well for us.
Wow, underdogs.
That's up in Pure Blind, or?
Yeah, I can get a battle report for you if you want.
Yeah, do that.
Cool. Was that on behalf of somebody, or were you fighting for yourselves?
Oh no, it's our Athanor. Our Athanor got killed, so we lost the objective.
Mm-hmm. Well, lost the objective, got the bragging rights. Okay, Elise, let's go back while they prepare that and finish talking about the Doom clocks and how that's worked against the Imperium.
So it's actually created a really neat dynamic in Delve that's been going on in the last 2 or 3 weeks, right? So the fighting isn't necessarily the big, huge slugfest where you wheel out the Guinness World Records and say, hey, so many people fought in these fights. No, the fights are much more dynamic because you're fighting over iHub control, and the ADMs naturally are very low. So you've got a lot of essentially ping-ponging back and forth. So you've got a lot of small fleets going after these small command nodes to make sure you capture them and stuff like that. And then you even send out fleets to start ratting in systems just to increase the ADM. So you've got a little bit more time to react. And then those fleets get attacked because, small little like pickup fleets to do ratting aren't really prepared for or really well suited for massive combat. So you do get a lot of like really, really small fights that kick off, not small, but you get like a good size fights that kick off unexpectedly throughout the day. It's not something you can set a timer to. It just, if you're there and the stars align, there's a really great fight for you to take part in. And it's so funny because you see groups, you're talking about like the richest groups in the game with thousands of super caps at their disposal, and they're flying like jackdaws and caracals to fight over these ADMs because that's like the best ship for the cause, or in like all interceptor fleets. So like these really cheap, cost-effective are like the most important in the entire war, because without SOV 3, or rather without the iHub going to strategic index of 3, I just call it SOV 3 because I'm old. Without that, these keep stars potentially are very hard to attack, right? Because you can tether a capital or super capital fleet to it, and as a defender, and help defend that way. So they become very, very hard to siege. So the plan that Pappy has really hinges on this Doom Clock, which is the name that the Imperium gave it for when these systems go to Index 3, which allows the jammer to be put online.
You keep saying SOV 3 like it's DEFCON 3, like.
Yeah, so in like 2 SOV systems ago, not this one, not the last one, but the one before it, SOV 3 is when you could put a jammer in. So that's why it like sticks in my head, because they just tied it all to one thing.
Minion SOV?
Yeah.
Right.
But,
so the clock is a representation that the Imperium themselves made, which was a website. And what you could see there are timers ticking down from 35 days or however many days it takes to get to ADM 3 down to 0. So each one of those, there's multiple Doom clocks for the keep stars that they're tracking. And those are their keep stars they're tracking. But the iHubs that they're tracking actually belong to their enemy, Pappy. And once those get to 0, go ahead and tell us what happens.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. So once that gets to 0, the system can be jammed, and essentially the Pappy forces have such an overwhelming advantage in terms of numbers that the defenders, they lose their advantage when that jammer goes up. So that's really the nature of these fights lately. The last couple of weeks, not even the last couple of days, but the last couple of weeks, have been fighting to regain control. And the Imperium have reset some of these Doom clocks, right? It's not a matter of stopping the threat. It's a matter of slowing it down. And the Imperium have been slowing it down a little bit.
Early on.
Yeah, Pappy have been good as of late for contesting all their iHub timers, because the Imperium are going out and aggressively trying to take these iHubs back to reset the clock, because that's how they would do it. So that's just the nature of the fighting now, and it's kind of funny because all of the biggest alliances in the game fighting, and they're just fighting over these iHub timers because one side wants the jammer and one side wants to delay it.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, well, it gives us something to look at. And interestingly, the Imperium had put the clock up and it was public. It was also something that they could point to show progress, as you were saying, because it's not this, you don't have set piece battles every week, but you need to motivate the people saying, look, we're building a wall brick by brick. Here are the bricks and here's the wall going up and it's being measured. So you could point to something and say, there's what we're working against. And it's a very smart tactic. But since it was public, it was also something that Pappy could point to and say,
yeah,
look.
It definitely became weaponized by the enemy in terms of from how the Imperium's point of view, right? They point this thing out as a way to motivate their members. Say, hey guys, this is the impending doom that we have to stop. And because they were very successful at stopping it, they could point out and say, ha, look, we've stalled them out. Now that stalling is going a little bit less, so the Pappy forces now meme on Doom Clock stuff all the time.
Isn't that like everything in the war though, where like everything motivates for different reasons? Like one side will be like, oh, we're being invaded and they're getting into us, we have to stand together, and fight the invaders, and the other side's like, we're making progress, and it's like the other side's holding them back. It's like the same thing, but it's motivating both sides, and this is just like another one of the same kind of deals, I think.
Yeah, interestingly enough, each side has picked they've cherry picked like a different aspect to show that they're winning.
I mean, that's just classic Eve, right?
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like alliances historically in big wars like this, alliances failed at doing that. They failed at keeping their members motivated for extended periods of time, and you would see groups fail cascade because of it. Because one side would gain so much more momentum while the other side was losing momentum, that the dynamic would shift between like an even fight or a slightly outnumbered fight to like this huge shift of one side going way up and one side going way down. And this is something you don't see. Both sides have been incredibly good. The leadership in both of these groups have been incredibly good at keeping their members motivated and making them feel like they're winning. I keep saying this, so I sound like a bit of a broken record, but true for right now. In fact, even more so. If you were to grab any member from any group right now that's involved in the war, if you were to ask them, is your side winning? Regardless of what side they're fighting for, they will definitively say yes. And to the point where they'll start trash talking the other guy for being wrong too. So, well, it's definitely fun.
That's good leadership in your view, but to me, it seems like the opposite. Because how do I put this? I shouldn't put it in regular election terms in the United States, right? Because we don't want to get political for people who don't want to deal with that kind of stuff in their video game. But it does feel like this war is definitely reducing the territory and the influence that the Imperium has. They're losing the war. I think it's pretty clear they are being encroached on. Their buildings are being destroyed.
We're winning.
What's that?
Their mentality. But no, we're winning. And I don't know what the numbers say. We're winning.
Something's not working, or something's not being looked at logically if you think you're winning this war and you're part of the Imperium. I don't mean that as a slight towards Imperium. It's just looking at the board, they're losing the war. But if they think they're winning the war, isn't somebody being deceptive towards them on the messaging front?
So I think there's a subtle difference here. The Imperium, they recognize that they're losing territory, but their view is by what they're doing is they have, withstood for so long, right? Against, and this is their quote, 150,000 people, which is not the case, but that's part of the meme. They've withstood for so long that there's no way that the onslaught can continue, so that they will eventually win. So even if they're not winning right now, they're walking their path to victory, and they're solidly on that path. So the way that they view that they will win is what they're on right now. So they're not like taking down tests brick by brick, but they view, like their viewpoint is that as this goes on longer, as they're able to withstand the barrage, that the opposing forces will break up, and then eventually they will have their chance at a counterattack.
So their goal is to tire them out.
Yeah, essentially.
Survive them until they naturally fall apart because they don't like each other anyway. That's the idea.
Yeah, so they're essentially they're winning by not losing fast enough. If you want to get like
heard that before.
Yeah, so that's definitely like an Eve thing.
Yeah.
So I want to interject here because there is a little bit of a sort of like cross wires kind of thing. In terms of Imperium's outlook on whether they're winning the war, whether they're losing the war, like the rhetoric of them still winning the war, like despite losing territory, despite losing structures, that kind of thing, is because they're utilizing Pappy's own goal, sort of goalposts for what they want to achieve in this war, which is the destruction of the Imperium, destruction of Goonswarm. Not the removal of Goonswarm's, sovereignty, but the destruction of Goonswarm.
Yeah, so that's definitely a note.
In that sense, they haven't lost significant amounts of players. Their membership is still standing fast. So it's in that kind of sense, with that kind of perspective, you can say that this is a much tighter war in that regard.
Yeah, so that's one of those things that the whole destruction of Goon Swarm thing, that's one of those things that I think that's like a pro-godism, right? Where he says something outlandish
Little bit, yeah.
to like rally his base. That's I remember being on this show listening to that message, and then we had like a little after show after, and I was like,
July 5th, yeah.
I was like, man, he really missed the mark on that one. He definitely, like, I think I gave them a letter grade, and I gave him like a C for that one, and I gave the Imperium an A because the Matani nailed it.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's one of those things that the Imperium are definitely holding on to for dear life, right? Like, forget the fact that they called Delve a fortress that was unassailable, and now Delve has been assailed. That messaging went out the door, right? That narrative shifted to Delve as a quagmire. You're going to step foot in here and die. That's one of the best pivots in this war so far, and the Imperium have been like crushing it.
Several pivots, I think, on both sides, but mostly the Imperium. They call this goalpost changing, but it's what it is. It's creating messaging to create conditions where you can still feel good about yourself, and that seems to be what's happening now. What I was saying earlier was it's artful that they can do it, but it also feels like untrue, and that's
so like.
But I don't know if they're supposed to be true or not. But from an analyst point of view, we want to look at it and say this is what's happening. Don't be deceived by what they're saying or what they're saying. So go ahead.
There's
Arsia.
a lot of different metrics by which you can feel good about your performance in any kind of fight or war. Like, one way is winning the objective, taking down the Astor House, the Keepstar, whatnot, taking the Sov. Another way is winning the ISK war. Maybe you lose the objective and win the ISK war. And another way is holding out when fighting outnumbered. And I feel like that is something that the Imperium has going for it. They are outnumbered by maybe not 150,000 people, but quite a lot of enemy forces bearing down on them, and they are holding pretty strong. They have to resort to the sovereignty levels, letting them put down jammers in order to assail the Keepstars. They can't just straight out attack them when sovereignty is held. So it's not like they don't have reasons to feel good. I think they do have reasons to feel good. But winning or losing a war is kind of hard to tell in a defensive war, I think, because, like, obviously they're losing territory, and I think they're losing the ISK war too, but, like, I mean, defensive wars are you're losing until you're not.
Yeah, so when you're on defense, I'd view it as if you survive and you hold out, and even if you're on the last Keepstar or last structure, you survive, you still own that territory. It's going to be really easy when they stop hammering down on you, really easy for you to go claim your space back.
So, like, there's a really, really monumental event in faction warfare, like, what is it, like 5 or 6 years ago. The Amar had been whittled down to one system remaining before the Minmatar had captured the entire war zone. The system was Satogas, and the narrative was Satograd shall not fall. And Satograd didn't fall, and the Amar captured the entire war zone first, coming back from one system. So, like, that's the thing about defensive wars. They're not over till they're over.
And
to this day, Satograd is a meme.
Is it?
Like, yeah.
Is it a meme? Oh, okay. Let me ask Suitonia in here. Just got in a little bit late, and I forgot we had Caleb in here. But Suitonia, what do you pay attention to this war at all? Let's start there.
A little bit. I followed the war quite heavily, like in August, but then I sort of stopped following it after then because it seemed like progress had sort of slowed down a little bit, at least from an outsider's perspective, because you don't just see like suddenly Fountain changes hands, suddenly Fountains belongs to Init again, etc. But yeah, I think it's really interesting, especially what's happening in Catch right now.
All right. Well, listen, we're not going to get anywhere with that, with this talk. So we'll move over to something else. This does have to do with messaging. So what did the four empires, and we'll say that was the Imperium on one side, they did their typical fireside chat last Saturday. We might have covered that a little bit last time. But interestingly, the Pappy forces, which don't have town halls or Q&A sessions or announcements, all had them at the same time to give an update, I think, before the holidays. So you had Vince talking to his troops, you had ProGod talking to his with Villy, answering some questions, and you had Gobbins doing a rare town hall with Horde. Was there anything you guys heard last Sunday that was interesting in there? Elise, you probably listened to the stuff. Or maybe
I listened to parts of it. I didn't really. It was
long, right? It was long.
It kind of goes on a little bit too much for me because I'm in the position where I don't need to be motivated or anything like that. I don't need, and so motivating someone and telling someone what the status is, it's very important. So people feel involved. They have a sense of agency over what's going on. But I'm not in that boat. So whenever Gobbins is talking, I think of Gobbins because I've known him for as long as I've been playing Eve, more or less. I just hear like the Gobbins from way back when talking. I'm like, if that Gobbins could hear this Gobbins, he would be smacking the crap out of himself. Yeah. So he's really kind of grown, and that's kind of what I focus on whenever I hear him talk. But I mean, the message is positive, right? They're saying, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what we're going to keep doing. Horde has had tons of success in this war. They've looked astounding. They're right now fighting a front and a half, I'll call it, because the Bastion and some other SIGs are deployed up north in Kalevala in that area, and they're defending structures, they're defending iHubs, they're defending Anselbeck, they're replacing jump bridges as they fall down. Nothing is dropping, right? There's nothing that's missing a beat. And they're going out and they're attacking parts of Fountain because that's like the low-hanging fruit. If you look through the area of Fountain that's touching Delve, all the iHubs are dead. So like, I don't know. I think the Horde are the real winners here. Well, I guess I'll call it there are two winners. I think the Initiative is having the most fun of anyone in this war. I think they're right where they want to be in terms of the fights that they can take, and I think they're having a lot of fun. And I think Horde is right there with them, right? The Horde members seem to be having a blast. They're really thriving in this situation. Unlike other groups, like Legacy has been fighting wars for the last 2 years, it feels like. Same with Fraternity and groups like them. But Horde's, they're fresh, right? They've got the fresh legs under them. They're just pushing through. They're taking every challenge around them. And they seem to be having a great time.
All right. Anything catch your eye that the Imperium said, or that Gobbin said specifically, or ProGod said specifically?
Oh, I didn't listen to the ProGod. Well, that one's probably spicy.
Well, that was like the 3-minute one, so that was the easy one to listen to. But it was harder to get your hands on it. I'll pass it to you if I can find it. But what I heard was interesting and not interesting at the same time. Everybody said a great many things, but I was looking for new subtexts. And the only thing I heard was that Legacy is going to get the whole tri-region state, right? Or the whole tri-region Delve area, or if you count Fountain, it's quadruple, whatever. But they're going to get Delve, they're going to get period basis, they're going to get Quarius, they're going to install that stuff if they win this war. Not if they lose, obviously not. But the rest of Pappy isn't getting anything. Like there's no dibs for Fountain. There's no nothing. So what that tells me is that maybe early on when they negotiated this entire war, maybe it was decided back then that really we don't want anything except the destruction or the reducing of influence of the Imperium. You guys can take all the spoils. And it struck me as like, it shows you the level of commitment, I think, that non-test or non-legacy has towards doing this. That's the signal it sent to me. Does that mean anything to you?
So the people that aren't legacy have everything to gain and nothing to lose. Like that's their big paycheck on this one, right? Either the Imperium crumbles and they have to rebuild, which is a win for them because they're diametrically opposed to the Imperium. They also live on the other side of the map, so they don't really care what goes on. They don't have to deal with the fighting on their doorstep. Or the alternative is the Imperium withstands and Test is crumbling. And actually both the Imperium and Legacy would be crumbling. So that's a win to them, right? So those guys, I don't want to say they don't They don't care, right? They're definitely involved. They're motivated. They don't need stuff. They don't need territory. Their motivations are death and destruction, and that's it. And so they're like motivated from the start. In fact, they're probably even more motivated knowing that someone's going to live in Delve, right? So the worst thing you can do, and this is something that they've done before, well, all of you has done before, is they've attacked an area, not lived in it, and then the group that used to hold that territory comes back and rebuilds. Most notably, against all authorities, AAA, they are notorious for doing this. They'd lived for almost a decade after they were a major EVE online powerhouse. They withstood because no one ever bothered to sit in their space after they died or after they were defeated in a military conflict. So they just were allowed to rebuild. They're given the opportunity to rebuild, and their social structures were so deep that they were entrenched in that region that they were able to rebuild once everyone kind of looked the other way. And so I think that's a lesson that Eve learned during the Honey Badger Coalition, which is before the Money Badger Coalition. That's when Pandemic Legion, NC. And Test went to war against AAA and the SoCo groups. They took that area and then they lived there. They said, hey, you know what? It's not just enough that we have to win. We have to win, and then we have to live here. And that's why Brave is in Ketch right now. Like that is the reason that Brave lives in Ketch. It's an aftermath of that fight or of that conflict. So that really showed the blueprint of that. Now, when you go back to World War B1, that area got I don't want to say they tricked Sword, but Sword Dragon moved into Declan. And so the Imperium had to rebuild somewhere else. They rebuilt in Delve because there was a huge vacuum there, and Delve is great space. So, this is just a sign of, from when I see it, it's a sign of legacies identifying what could happen if they just take the territory and just let it sit there. They will have spent all this effort for nothing. They know that they have to, in order to see this through, if they win, they have to live in Delve. So it's not necessarily of, we get to live in Delve, because their space is great. Esoteria is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's got good true sec, stuff like that. It's not a matter of, we have to live here, or we get to live here. It's, we have to live here to see it through. So it's kind of a cherry on top for everyone else fighting too. So like in your view, when you look at it, like very at a high level, you're like, well, these legacy guys get all this great territory. But the other people are like the other people in Pappy are like seeing this, and they're smiling and nodding because they know, hey, like if this doesn't happen, we did all this for nothing. So they're really happy to see that someone's going to live in Delve, someone's going to live in Period Basis, someone's going to occupy Fountain, so that like the rebuilding process can happen.
Right. So that said, and this will be the last point on this, it seems to me strategically, the Imperium, if they lose, again, I'm speaking into the future on what looks like what's going to happen, but not necessarily is going to happen, that sticking around in Delve and fighting an insurgent campaign is prolonging the war, which could be good or bad depending on fatigue factors, but it is also keeping Test whole in one area. Whereas what Initiative's doing and what Bastion has been doing, attacking, say, the backfield legacy space and destroying that and taking it over or whatever, wouldn't that be more complicated to defend for Test if, let's say the Imperium, I'm not suggesting they do this, okay, so this is not, but if they were to go over further away from Delve, wouldn't they be stretching Test out to chase them? That sort of thing.
I think there's a limit on the groups within the Imperium that can achieve that. And I think that list starts and ends with the Initiative. And I think Bastion are doing a fantastic job, because if you asked me a year ago, do you think Bastion, the Alliance, can deploy away from the Imperium and have an effect? And I don't mean to insult anyone from the Bastion, but I would laugh at that statement. I would say, no. Like, what are they going to do? Do they have anyone that can do anything? I don't hear anyone in the Bastion. Turns out they made me look the fool, because they're having tremendous success doing it. But I think it's it's very, and this is why we should credit the Bastion members, because it's very hard to do a deployment like that when you're part of a coalition. When you see the rest of your friends getting assailed, being able to have that presence of mind that's saying, hey, I'm being more effective here doing this, and I have the ability to do that and do that effectively, then I go over there. Right, so I don't want to say a strong, independent group that don't need no
strong,
coalition,
independent woman. Yeah,
but they actually absolutely are, right? So the initiative are bigger in size than the Bastion, so they can get away with that a lot better, and they can have much more success. The Bastion are doing a bang up job. Like, they started this whole process, right? They're the ones that showed initiative that they could do this, or that, hey, this is a possibility. But for the rest of the Imperium, I don't think there's another group in there that the Imperium would want to let go and do that. Just because of how the Imperium is formed, right? There are SIGs, there are like special interest groups and stuff like that, but those SIGs are generally led by FCs, and you don't want those FCs going somewhere else and having a good time taking fair victories as your home is burning, right? So you can't have Asher deploying to Geminate when you need Asher and Delve protecting your home. So I think that they can't really deploy anywhere else at this point, or they can't send anyone else anywhere else.
All right. Well, there's your first hour of war news, getting you caught up. It's been a huge event this year since July. Thanks, Elise, for going through the week's events. Hey, let's have a look, Suitonia, at your battle there. What happened? Do we have that on... Sorry, we were supposed to get an MER next, but I forgot that you had a battle report that we could look at. Sorry, Maccloud.
Oh yeah, I can talk about it briefly. I wasn't involved in planning this or anything, so I was just a grunt on the field. But essentially, we had an Athanor that's in ex-Empire space. Those guys live in Pureblind. One of the alliances in Pureblind. And they're mostly neutral, although they're friends with a lot of other Russian blocks, such as Siberian Squads and Bandalogs Alliance, which also live in Pureblind, as well as Trailer Park Initiative, I think they're called, or Trailer Park Illuminati. Yeah, so they reinforced an Athanor that we just had down there because it belonged to an old UFC corp that joined Volta, which was like Fleet Angel Security Squad, and it was the whole timer for an Athanor. So we dropped in. I think Hanzo came through a wormhole. He's like a Siberian Squad FC plus Bandalogs. They had about 90 to 100 Cerberus, like 100-man Cerberus fleet. So we brought Nightmares to fight them. And there was a few other groups around, like Silent. I think Bandalogs have like a new Bro Corp in Silent Company, so they bought a bunch of Blackbirds and Crucifiers. And we didn't bring caps of our own because we heard, we've got intel that Snuff was going to drop dreads on us. We also got intel that Siberian Squad have like 30-40 dreads in the area as well. So we went pretty light. We just dropped 2 faxes. Initially, we traded very, very well. I think we killed like almost 40 Cerberuses or so. It's a pretty neutral battle report. Eventually, Siberian Squads and Bandalogs dropped dreads on our faxes, and we killed all of the dreads. And we were mostly cleaning up, and then Snuff dropped on top of us. I think what Bandalogs and Siberian Squads were trying to do is trying to force us to escalate by just dropping like 6 dreads on our faxes, so that we would like counter drop them, and then they could just bring in Snuff to dunk us. But that didn't end up happening, so Snuff just ended up like catching like 5 Nightmares and cleaning up our 2 facs.
All right. What's the overall context of that battle?
What do you mean?
Like,
you mean like part of a larger part of a war or something?
Yeah, objectives.
Sure, yeah. I think ex-Empire, who recently took like 2 constellations in Pureblind, they've been there for like 3 or 4 months now. They just want to take that Athanor because I believe it's an R32 or an R64, and they just want to take it because it's in their space. And we've successfully defended it for about 6 weeks, and they finally destroyed it this time.
All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on what's going on over there. I didn't know you were still in Voltex. You seem to do so many things.
Yeah, I'm still in Volta. The area up north is actually pretty interesting right now. There's a lot of really smaller alliances that are sort of involved in kind of like medium-sized coalitions together. It's like all of Fade and like parts of Declan are kind of allied together, and then all of Pureblind and part of Decline are allied together and are fighting each other. So you have like a region and a half versus a region and a half worth of people. And the fights tend to be mostly about the same numbers, although the Declan guys bat phone Hanzo from Siberian Squads quite frequently and snuffed out. So we have to kind of be tactful with what we do. But yeah, it's been a lot of good fights between us, mostly even fights.
That's a really cool theater to follow up on. Every once in a while, I'll get a message from Starfleet commander from Volta, and he'll be like, "Look at this fight," and it's like just this completely lopsided Volta dunking fight. And they really, Volta has really kind of reemerged as that medium gang powerhouse of an alliance that they kind of are known for being, taking like fights outnumbered. Taking like these, like Suitonia mentioned, there were 40 caps versus 2, and they still came out ahead. It seemed like, just because of the virtue of the fight. So it's really cool to see that while the big powers are away, that power vacuum that's created in the north is just absolutely thriving still. Right? We talked about it at the beginning of the year. We had some people on from the groups that were up there that were kind of living in tribute, and they weren't getting. They were growing and having a lot of fun. They had like a fight club type of environment out there, but it's really growing into like a much deeper, more fun seeming conflicts too.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Okay, let's look at move along to economic stuff out of the war zones. And what came out yesterday or a couple of days ago was the monthly economic report for November. We saw some interesting stuff on there, most notably the mining index has soared through October, and in November totally stopped. But it stopped at its highest point by far. It's twice as high as it has ever been. So a mining index is basically taking a little sampling of all the ores or all the minerals, putting them in a basket, and then saying, how is that the prices for that basket different than it was at a certain point before? And they measure this 3 years ago, and then they measure this all the way to the beginning of the game. And in both cases, the price for that little basket is twice as high as it has ever been. The last time it was this high, or not this high, but even close, was 2012, to give you an idea. So that mineral index through October just spiked up to, I think, 180, which is 80% more than, I guess, the initial starting point when it started. Which is crazy if you think about it. The game opens up, right? And all prices are going to be high when a new game comes around. So it's already like at a standard point. So most of the time in EVE Online from 2003 through 2010, the mining index was actually like 70% because the prices started high and they dipped down 30% for a long time. And then they shot up in like 2012 to maybe 120% or something like that. Then they started going back down to about, I think only last year at this time, the mining index was like at a 65% what the price was when the game started. And within a year, because of scarcity, that basket of mineral goods has shot up past 100%, up to 180%, basically, of what it was when the game started, which is crazy high. And then it stopped. And I think that's an interesting aspect of it. So in November, it's kind of just stopped. It hasn't gone any higher than it was. In fact, it's starting to come down a little bit. Do you guys have any insight into why that would happen?
I've got some insight. I don't know if it's good. Caleb's probably got the correct insight. But I mean, when I see that, my view is just like because of the redistribution of how ore is spread through the game, and how obviously because everyone's going to war, so no one's really doing that much mining, or there's less mining than there was at this point a year ago. Just the value of certain ores went up by virtue of just all the changes they've made through scarcity and stuff like that, and how they're refined. So, you know, that basket goes up in price too. Like Noxium, for example, the Noxian prices are going wild, or at least went wild for a while.
Yeah.
I know Morphite prices.
They're still going up.
Kenneth Veld owns like all the Morphite in the game now because he's just the Morphite king. I don't know if I should have told everyone that, but yeah, if you're buying Morphite, you're buying it from Kenneth.
Oh my God, the last 2 months, it has gone up 400%. That's the last 2 months. So since October.
Yeah, that's your key factor, right? When you have a basket and then the basket sensitivity to the different types of components in it. Well, Elise just mentioned both. We've mentioned both Nox and Morphite, and then of course Isogen as well. All these things like exploded, right? So this is not that unexpected. And then of course the lull in resource gathering, and it's just all these factors all at once has made it explode like this. But to me, it looks fairly healthy.
Pyrite's actually skyrocketed too. That's also quadrupled in the last 2 months alone. So those two alone are going to push that basket price overall low because Tritanium's coming down. So are a couple other minerals.
You should see it almost flip, right? Where the most frustrating things in a near future is going to be the lock-in minerals. So that will be the lower end ones because they're not really open for import-export. So they can't really level out, right? But the top ones will figure out a new normal when they start getting moved around. And of course, with the exception of the low-sec stuff, which I'm a little bit, worried about. But I don't think anyone is really going to seriously set up shop in low-sec for resource gathering. So it's gonna trickle in, and that's going to really set that price as, well, almost like the new bottleneck. So I think Isogen and Mexilon, actually Mexilon, those two are going to be the future bottlenecks, very much like they used to be in the past, right? So I don't think this is so bad. I just hope that they put this agency-based resource availability back in the game very soon, because come the ass end of this war and COVID, we're going to need something to do, and resource gathering might actually be what we need.
How about the rest of you guys? You have any thoughts on the mining prices skyrocketing?
I mean, we're coming out of scarcity. There's the ores and whatnot are starting to spawn. People still haven't figured out the low sec ores quite yet, and I'm sure they will. Especially after this event, there's a lot of people mining right now in low sec with the ice. But I do think that people will figure it out, and we'll see what the new normal will be as time goes on. But it's definitely not normalized.
There was, if I look at it carefully, October specifically, that's when the prices went nuts. And actually September before that. Now, yes, there were scarcity changes, which puts you on alert to do something, right? Like, how do I avoid the damage from these changes of the game? But there was something else going on at that time. A lot of ships were being destroyed in Delve, right? Like a lot. And even before those ships were destroyed, people knew there would be a lot of ships destroyed. So I think there was a buying frenzy on minerals. Now, I'm not sure about that, but it makes sense to me that the price is going up because demand is outstripping supply in a big way.
I feel like there was a buying frenzy the second they announced the mineral changes.
Probably also a giant selling frenzy too.
Market speculators.
Stockpiles.
There definitely was a buying frenzy. Like,
it goes both ways.
So it may be an artificial skyrocketing. It did stabilize after, it stabilized in November in the last report that we saw, and you may see that come down. I can't imagine it would go much higher than it already is. Plus, we had one last thing. We had indications that CCP was going to start putting some mineral asteroid carrots in the world a while ago by the end of the year. So at some point soon, there should probably be some buffing of harvesting of minerals. Elise?
Yeah, they already did. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go, Suits.
I said they already did add some new Bistor and Arcanaut sides to every single null sec system in the game. And I think you get like a bigger side if it's lower than 0.5, which were the systems that were struggling to raise ADMs.
Those were anomalies, not belts, right?
Yeah. Those
they're
weren't
anomalies.
the belts. That was just the Anom.
Yeah,
Haven't the
there's
Anoms
guaranteed
been the problem?
anomalies.
Haven't they been the problem all along?
Yeah, probably. It is confusing why CCP added the anomaly rather than the belt, but I assume it's probably because the belts all use like really old janky code. Because like there's no ore in Providence and Curse, for example, because none of the systems are a high enough true sec for ore to spawn because of like the classifications of the space there. So I assume with an Anom, it's probably much easier for CCP to just tweak a number. Like right now, for example, there's, I don't know, 100, I think it's 180,000 meters cubed of ore in there. So you could very easily just, change a number in a spreadsheet and then boom, the Anom's done. Or you can just change the respawn time or whatever. Whereas with belts, it uses like much more complicated old code stuff. Like I think belts respawn on like certain days, like Friday, Wednesday, and Monday or something.
Thought, like when you mine ore somewhere, it like respawns somewhere else that it's able to in a belt. Something weird like that. I think you have to like sacrifice a goat to the POS code and then
to Bob.
The POS code.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. That makes sense though. That it's a mechanical reason, not necessarily a design reason, to use Anoms, which they can control better now since it's more modern code for them to work with. Cool. Elise, I cut you off too.
Oh no! In terms of the mineral thing, there is one other thing, and this is kind of to your point in terms of how much stuff was destroyed in October through the big fights. If you look at the dreadnought losses specifically in October, they were massive, right? And so dreadnoughts, as it's not like a super, right? When a super dies, generally you buy a super that's on the market from someone else who isn't using their super or something like that. You don't necessarily build one, especially in this environment, right? The build cost is just too high. When a dread dies, there isn't just like, some groups do have caches of dreads. Don't get me wrong, but dreads were dying outside of the Delve war zone as well, or the World War B war zone as well. So in October, 6 trillion ISK worth of dreads died, compared to pretty much any other month ever, and that number hovers around 1.5 to 2 trillion. So you're seeing these dreads that need to be replaced in an environment where minerals are a little bit more scarce. So that does drive the numbers, especially for tritanium, which is, I think that's why it spiked as much as it spiked in October. That obviously there's also some uncertainty of how easy it's going to come to get, right? So you can see that the number spike really high and then kind of like slowly start coming back down. But yeah, October, just in terms of capitals that died, it's a huge number. In terms of ISK, it's absolutely nuts.
In terms of minerals,
yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. All right, another thing in the so that's the mineral thing. Don't fear it too much. It should come down at some point. Tritanium, you can already see, is being well supplied or starting to be well supplied. It's dropped from 9 per unit down to 6. That's a very for tritanium. So some of the low end stuff, the T1 builder minerals will be around. The Morphite, you got to ask Kenneth for some. I want to know why he's collecting so much Morphite. That guy, always watch what he does because he's a smart guy. Because Morphite's really used in T2 more than anything else, right?
Yeah, and I mean, all the fighting has moved to T2 in the big war, at least. No one's really flying battleships. I say that as yesterday, Raven Initiative were flying Ravens and Legacy were flying Typhoon Fleet issues. So yeah, they're still flying battleships, but for the most part, it's Eagles, Serbs, Munins, stuff like that.
T2 ships. Okay. All right. The other thing that was big was the drop in NPC ratting. Gigantic cliff that it just fell off of. Did you guys see that? We'll put that up as soon as we can. It was down to its lowest point almost ever, but we had blackout a year ago in August.
Wasn't that sort of because of how the ESS distributes the money? Like the ESS, part of the money you rat goes into a pot and then it pays out in a couple hours, right? So that wouldn't have gotten counted in the bounties, Wouldn't that be the discrepancy that caused it to be so low?
Yep.
Yeah, and then
Yeah,
there's also
so-
the dynamic bounty system as well. I think there was a good chart. I think River posted it, or someone said it's from River that was in one of the channels.
Yeah.
I would say that those that are ratting are probably making more right now, but there's not nearly as many people ratting.
So that's come down, right? I've noticed that people were saying at the beginning ESS, there was all kinds of ESS to take. And now there's kind of not because people stopped ratting. Has that been your experiences, you three that do this sort of thing?
I feel like I've seen an average amount of people ratting recently, at least in the late time zone when I roam. Like I was running around Tenal last night, and there was just tons of Ishtars and Gilas in like every system, right? So I don't think it's dropped as much as people have been saying. It's definitely dropped in like the war zone down in Aquarius and Delve and Esoterra to some degree, but I don't think it's dropped elsewhere so much.
So out of interest, real quick, like, do you think that the MER numbers are basically lacking the payouts to
Yes.
two players, like
Yes,
entirely?
as far as I can tell. That graph only shows the top 8, so it's not actually included. I think you can find the ESS payout data, but you'd have to like manually add it onto that graph.
That makes a lot of sense then. That really explains why that cliff happened, because it just, instead of coming into a bounty, it kind of gets laundered in a sense through the ESS.
Yeah. It's a bookkeeping error. Or
I called it CCP's creative bookkeeping. They've basically messed with the MER, so we can't see what's happening anymore.
That's good strategy.
I mean, I'm just looking at the agency right now in terms of people that are ratting. There are a ton of people still ratting. There's systems in Oasa where the dynamic bounty system is at 38%. What? Why would you even do anything there?
Well, they're not right. They're
Well, yeah, they've had to abandon that system for something else.
You're assuming they have a free will.
So what I would like to see is a report on the ESS, like how much was looted over the month, how much was defended, and how much was paid out. I think that'd be really useful information.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and
Noisy Gamer says Dotland is showing a 30% decline in rats killed in nullsec. I believe that is overall. But especially in Oasa, I think they're down 50%. That is the home of Fraternity, and they were the greatest ratters up until that. In the last few months, they took that crown away from Delve. But they can't really do business the way they did business before. I believe Winter Coalition is moving to Vale, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if that's public yet. Let me make sure that's accurate before I say that. But there's... there is a rumor that they are moving to Vale away from Oasa, which would be pretty telling how important these DBS changes were, the dynamic bounty system, right?
Just to add to this is one of the examples of what really is required in the future when it comes to MER. CCP really needs to put some more meaningful numbers in there and make sure that we have all the different parts of the raw data. The fact that we're getting only intel on an ISK side on bounty payout, we need something like the statistic numbers of how many ships are being killed. And of course we can go to Dotland, but these things should really be in the MER. It's the same with when you're looking at things like metrics from mining. We also need to know a little bit more on, say, something like volume and actual labor hours in there instead of just raw ISK numbers, because these things always need to be corrected. This is also why I don't like the graph that you showed earlier, because that is not, as far as I know, normalized based on ISK inflation or more ISK available in the game. So it keeps getting more and more wrong.
Well, I adjusted the MER graph a little bit.
Okay. Well, anyway, it's but as far as the numbers that they measure and give to us, that is, they, CCP, give to us, the players, this is only the second time And the last time was a fluke, that incursions are being more profitable than NPC ratting. So that was a stark drop. We haven't seen this since Blackout, which was a tremendous disturbance in the force for nullsec that happened a year ago. So that's the big news coming out of the MER. You guys have anything else on the monthly economic report?
One of the neat things that I like to look at is the velocity of ISK, which is essentially how much ISK is turning over on a daily/monthly basis. And the velocity of the ISK has gone down, I don't want to say substantially, but it has gone down noticeably in this month's MER. I think there's a graph that shows it kind of just sloping a little bit. And essentially what that means is money isn't changing hands. So people are being a little bit more conservative. The economy is contracting a little bit, which doesn't necessarily indicate anything good or bad, right? It could just be that it's going back down to the normalized baseline that CCP want, or it could just be that we're in like some weird Eve recession right now. So it kind of depends where CCP view the baseline that they want to keep, because obviously they have a number in mind for where they want this, where they deem it to be a healthy ecosystem. And I'm curious as to if we've gone below that line or if we're going towards that line or what. But yeah, that is something that I strongly suggest people keep an eye on, because when it's going down, it does mean that the EVE economy is getting a little bit tighter.
So you're saying it's going down, but this is a graph over the course of a year, and there's a little bit of a spike right there at the end, which is the last one.
It seems very much like it's flattening out, like it's sort of stabilizing.
Yeah, it's been going down since March, but then in November towards the end of November, it started to kind of go up again.
So
but there's a little V right there.
Is everybody buying their Secret Santa presents?
This is like the theoretical minimum, I think, that the EVE economy can actually reach when it comes to velocity of ISK. This is like the least economic activity that can be happening at any time. And this is like the bottom, and it's, as you see, it's starting to climb back up. But we need some more activity and incentives. And then, of course, when you have something like war, a lot of exchange starts becoming slightly more internalized. So there's not that much outward and public trade changing hands back and forth all the time like you do normally.
Well, what you see there, that big dip, right? Because it's pretty much a consistent line, except the dip. That's Blackout again, had wide-ranging effects as people essentially sat on their hands waiting for Blackout to end. It was understood pretty clearly that it wasn't a permanent state, so people were just waiting. Therefore, you stop playing. You play WoW Classic at that time when it came out. So that's that big dip. Then when it ended, you could see it resumed pretty much where it was before. But then what happens in March 10th is an update called Broker Relations comes out and kills day trading as we know it. It essentially means you've got to predict the market better over a longer period of time. You can't just constantly do the Price is Right thing, for those Americans that ever watched that show, where you say $1.01 puts you over the guy who bid $1. So there was a lot of that kind of stacking, pancaking of orders. That gameplay went away with Broker Relations, and I think a lot of people got out of the marketplace, and you can see a decline from that point going forward, essentially. People not trading as much because it was a little harder to predict.
You have to remember, when it comes to a graph like this, it's also sensitive to its opposite, right? So the availability of ISK coming into the game, because as have been discussed many times, when you reach a certain level of gameplay and you figure out how to manage your income stream and your quote-unquote budget, especially for wealthy players, then money is stagnating up there. It's a bit like when Merkelchen was making fun of the fact that he went out and splurged a few weeks ago on one of those, I think it was a
Vanquisher or something.
Yeah, something like that. It's like, because I don't know what else to use my money for, right? And this is what's also reflected. So when you're seeing this decline, right, that's for the accretion of wealth in the top of the system, and this is basically sensitive to ISK faucets in the game.
Well, Caleb, like it shows in the overall kind of like on this particular graph, it literally shows like the slow and gradual downward trend, which is entirely correct when you consider that over time. Obviously, with sinks and faucets being kind of configured the way that they are in Eve, like we're getting a slow and gradual accrual of ISK over time. Like everybody's sort of like getting a little richer. But obviously that's offset by sort of inflated prices for various different things. So like the velocity of ISK, as you can kind of see on the graph, is in a gradual like slope downwards, but that is understandable when you consider that like the pool of ISK is increasing constantly.
Yeah, and if you wanted a more meaningful number to tell you something about how hot or cold the economic activity is, you would have to correct for that accretion, because that is a natural thing that you can't really stop unless you do something really radical with the game.
Yeah,
Right.
it's also worth pointing out that there's going to be like a big expenditure for most corps coming up at the end of January with the cores, right? At the end of January, everyone's going to need to put a core in their structure. So I know, like, for example, Volta as a corporation, we need to like spend like 70 or 80 bill just to like core all of our like forts and Afnors and Astra houses. So I'm sure that number is a lot bigger for groups like Goons and Horde.
Yeah. There's also a couple other things that this velocity talks about. We won't go into them now, but I'll just name this is something Caleb mentioned: verticalization of players, where you own the production line from top to bottom. Therefore, you don't need to trade money with other people. You're trading money with yourself, which doesn't show up on this graph. You also, SRP programs aren't represented here, ship replacement programs.
Oh, I think they are. I think they are, because most of those are exchanged by contract, and those contracts are not set to free. You're compensated. So they actually do create some activity, right? Because you claim a contract and then you get potentially the money back for it, right?
Oh, that's good. I didn't know contracts were in that velocity of ISK. All right, good. You know what? Maybe more stuff's in there since it's since CCP can check the transition of money differently than a government can. So they're actually measuring.
It's all wallet ISK transactions, as far as I know. So every time money is moved from one wallet to another, I'm not sure if it does it internally. So if you start messing with it, maybe something. The goons can go and test and see what happens if they move trillions from one account to another inside a corporation, and if it messes this number up completely.
Well, they have that ability clearly, because when somebody violates the RMT laws, they have to go and take all that money out, and they track it to other players' accounts and pull it out of their accounts as well. So they can definitely track where the money goes, at least through the database. Okay. Next on our list, that's the monthly economic report. What do we have next?
I want to pet Hateless's cat so badly.
Do we have a commercial break to pet Hateless's cat?
She just ran off.
We should.
I don't think we quite have that yet. I think we're working on it. We're working on kind of like some kind of little commercial break kind of thing. That's kind of interesting and very in keeping with Eve, right?
Yeah, definitely. That is,
I would like to say thank you very much for the people who have subbed, and also for Pando for rating us with a party of 83. Thank you.
I have misplaced my notes. They're not where they were. So unless somebody deleted them.
Are we going to mention the snowball fight?
Yeah, might as well. Go ahead and tell us what that is.
So every year in EVE Online, there's a pilot by the name of Commander A9 that puts on a snowball fight in Luminaire. And it is a yearly festive event that you should go check out. Set Luminaire as your destination. It's LUMINE something. I don't remember exactly how to spell it. But it's also on your EVE launcher. But they put on a whole thing. You can win things if you go participate and throw snowballs. Starts at 2100 EVE time, and go there with something that throws snowballs and go have fun. If you don't have anything that throws a snowball, I'm sure they'll be handing them out.
Yeah, so it's a thing that that is organized, and it's kind of become like an yearly Eve tradition. I know. I'm sure CCP Convict is going to be there. I'm sure he'll take a giant ship that can hurl snowballs. I wouldn't be surprised.
We got to kill a Titan in high sec. It was quite fun. He just spawned one, and we got to kill it.
But yeah, so there's always like neat stuff going on. Definitely, if you've got nothing going on, it starts 8 o'clock Eve time, 2000 Eve time, so you can go over there and get situated. Should be a lot of fun.
Killing a Titan with snowballs must be like the death of a billion cuts.
All right. So that's today. Get into the swing of things. Also, you should know, of course, right now we're in the middle of the Winter Nexus, which has a very profitable set of activities that you can do. Have you been doing anything with that, Hateless?
I've made billions with very little actual effort. I've been doing the combat sites. They're quite fun. In low sec, they're significantly rewarding. So I would really recommend you grab something cheap and go have fun in low sec and risk it for the biscuit, because the biscuit is very worth risking it for the biscuit.
Yeah, it's still insanely profitable. Like, I literally stopped doing it because I was just bored of making money. I think I made 25 billion ISK, which is a huge sum of money for me because I don't really usually do anything for ISK over the course of a week by just logging in the evening. I don't even leave the system. I just stay in there because the storms are pretty slow moving.
Yeah,
unfortunately,
I need your setup, man. I've been playing with some random things.
Unfortunately, the pirates have gotten wise to it as well.
Okay.
So they've dropped a Fortizar in there. So whenever there's like a lot of activity, they kind of undock and go. But they mostly just sit idle in their fort, so I can get away with quite a lot.
Matter. You lose one every now and then. It's not a big deal.
You're like the mouse at Christmas, roaming the house.
Yeah, but unlike other events where it has been very much like Feast or Famine, where you get like some small baseline, and then you hit the lottery. This one seems to be a little bit more normalized, right? So you always get a pretty good reward for every site that you finish. So you're never really, if you do one, you'll probably end up ISK positive for whatever your ship is, as long as you kind of get your loot safe. And then if you get 2 or 3, if you hit the third one, you're definitely making money in terms of...
The return on investment for the ships are insane. So I've been doing 2 Reykjaviks. The total cost is like 600 million ISK. After 3 or 4 sites, they're paid for, and I can sit there and they have micro jump drives. So they're not the easiest things to catch, but they are catchable. And it's fun. You lose some, you win some, and every now and then you get a fight, and then you get some cool loot, and then there's blueprints that have an unknown value. Well, we can kind of figure out their value, but you just get all kinds of goodies. The data sites I'm hearing are incredibly lucrative, and so are the ice mining sites. So regardless of what you want to do, there's money to be made in low sec doing the event. And then also in high sec, contesting sites is incredibly lucrative, like surprisingly so. So if you can win most contests and you just kind of chase a group around in high sec, you'll like double your income because they're working for you because you're taking all the loot, and it's quite fun to do that as well.
What do you mean by contesting sites?
So like the NPC, go ahead, Hateless.
What happens is if there are 2 groups or 2 people or multiple people on a site, it would be referred to as contest. This is really common in things like incursions. All the payout goes to the victor. So if you go in there with something that does or applies more DPS than the other person, you guys would clear the site together. And then on the last NPC, if you do the most damage to it, of everybody that's doing damage, you get the wreck. So if you're in the fleet with a guy that does the most damage, you get the wreck. Or if there's like 5 other people running the site, you do the most damage, you get the wreck, you get the payout. So you contested, it's competition. You win, you get the payout. And if there's multiple people contesting sites, the person who's getting the payouts more often is making a lot more than if he was just running the sites alone.
Yeah, it used to be, if people have done these sites before and they've taken a break, it used to be whoever got the final blow on the NPC would do it. CCB changed that a few patches ago. So it's whoever does, as Hateless says, whoever does the most damage gets the payout and ownership of the wreck.
Just make sure you bring your warp disruptor in case they try to take it anyway.
Yeah, so if they loot your wreck, they go suspect in high sec, and you can everyone in Eve can shoot them for 5 minutes. So
Yeah, 15, right?
15 minutes.
Suitonia, have you been doing any of these?
Yeah, I was doing the ice mining sites in nullsec and the exploration sites in nullsec mostly. It's like mass multi-boxing them in nullsec, and it's actually really good ISK. I was just using like I think 8 endurances, and I was just doing it because it's like fairly AFK. Like the rocks are pretty small; they've already got like 7 ice in them, but like it takes like a minute for an endurance ice thing to cycle, and it's actually really safe to AFK in them because you can't actually get anything inside that isn't a mining ship or an industrial. So there's like no dictors, there's no like fast tackle ships really. Like if people are trying to meme you, generally they're in like really fat, slow stuff like Procurers or Nereises, so they're never really going to catch your endurances. So and it's like spooky for like some solo guy, like PvP prospect or something to come into 7 endurances that all have drones. So yeah, I've just been doing it because it's AFK, and it's actually really good ISK. Like I think you make like 30 million ISK roughly like per hour, but that's like almost entirely AFK per character. So like between the 8 ones, I was making like 200 mil because the boxes can be surprisingly lucrative.
Yeah, and then in low sec, they're more lucrative, and the rules are about the same. Yeah. Low sec is where the goods are. So if you're comparing the 3 securities to each other, high sec would be the least rewarding. Null sec's kind of in the middle. And I think they did that because null sec is arguably safer than high sec. Depends on who you talk to, but null sec is arguably safer. Null sec is safer than high sec in my mind, at least. And then low sec would be the most dangerous space because it's random. Nobody controls the space. It's the wild west, and that's where all the good rewards are for this event. I think that's really neat.
Yeah, I think CCP really got the like reward balance structure really right for this event. I think they have done for a lot of the other events where low sec, which is like by far the most dangerous space, it has the best drop rate.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So that is the Winter Nexus. You can find the storms on your map. Just go to the, I think it's geography and statistics section of your map. That's a filter by color. And in that list, you'll see that there's metaliminal storms. And when you click on that, you'll see normally there's only 8 storms on the board and they're in nullsec, but you'll see that Empire Space and low sec, or Empire high sec, Empire low sec, both filled with these ice storms, and that's where these where a number of this stuff happens. That's not where everything happens, is it?
Yeah, all of the event stuff is inside the metaliminal storm systems, and you don't necessarily have to use the map as well. You can just use one of the filaments. I believe you get filaments from just the login rewards, and you also can get them for doing like the snowball, like throwing a snowball at people too. So
they're stupidly cheap in Jita now.
It was really
came out. They were like 4 or 5 million a piece. Now they're like hundreds of thousands of this.
Wow.
Buy a handful and go have fun.
It was really fun when they were there was the metaliminal ice storm in New Eden, the system with the Eve Gate.
Oh wow!
Because we yeeted and we landed in New Eden. We're like, well, we're in the middle of nowhere. That's fantastic. All right, and you have all those great name systems like Dead End and Access Point and Promised Land, and that's just like a fun area to trail around in.
Yeah, there's one of the storms is roaming around that area, and it's actually really common to get yeeted there. I've been doing a lot of I found a place that I like a lot, and so what I'll do when I reship is I'll go by the ship and I'll yeet and I'll cloak the ship and I'll yeet and I'll cloak the ship. I end up in New Eden quite often. It's a common one, so there's a lot of traffic there and a lot of fun to be had.
So we got a new guy at TIS. His name is Strata. We've done so much fundraising off his face because he's a beautiful man. And literally, it's like Looney Tunes where the man turns into a wolf and his lips start clapping and he's all like, crazy. That's what happens when the ladies or whatever see Strata. So
when everybody sees Strata.
When everybody sees Strata, yeah. So it's a joke. We're resting his face for later when we do some fundraising.
I'm just thinking in terms of fundraising. I'm kind of glad that you didn't speculate into those filaments. By the way,
that's right. This is Heave, so it's 99% guys. So who knows? Okay, there I did find my notes. So they were actually right here in the podcast channel the whole time. So we covered the war, we covered economics, we covered the stuff going on in the game with the Winter Nexus, and now we want to talk. Well, first of all, a quick little something, Elise, so you can help me celebrate this. Titans, 15 years old as of a couple days ago, the 15th. That's when they came into the game under the expansion Red Moon Rising.
But don't worry,
Man,
guys.
that's absolutely nuts.
Don't worry, guys. There will only be like 4 or 5 in nullsec, so don't worry.
It's been 15 years of motherships at the time. That's what they were called. And Titans. The motherships became super carriers.
That's actually super nifty. So some of the first Titans in EVE, they had an AoE Doomsday, essentially just a very large smart bomb. They were also completely broken because they could be fired through a Sino. So this was like the first groups that got the Titans. You would find a fleet, light a Sino on like a cheetah or something, and then the fleet would be completely wiped out, and you would not have any idea why. And there would be this guy, probably called the Enslaver, sitting on the edge of a pass somewhere, just nuking your fleets.
So I wanted to quickly ask something. Like, Elise, you were around at that kind of time, right?
Yeah, I was a nobody, and more of a nobody, I should say. Yeah,
I'm just kind of wondering if anybody actually knew the actual mechanic, like how the Doomsday actually went through a Sino, because I'm fairly certain like that wasn't a mechanic that was built into the game. It was kind of like unintended sort of consequences, right?
I think it was. I mean, it was changed relatively quickly to the point where the Titan then needed to be on the field. But at that time, a lot of the Titan owners were also working at CCP because a lot of the people there were like super passionate about this game, and they played, and they knew all these weird mechanics that there was no manual for. So when these things came in, they were like, "Oh shit, we gotta work here, or we gotta get one of these," and they would like. Obviously not all of them, but some of them were. The Enslaver ended up working at the CCP as well, but that was after he got his Titan. He was on the CSM, and then he ended up working there for a time. But yeah, a lot of CCPers had some knowledge about that. This was back when they were allowed to play. There was an Icelandic corporation in AAA called the Collective. And that happened to be a lot of CCPers in there, or a lot of people. Maybe if they weren't CCPers, they were associated with CCP in some way, because everyone in Iceland. And if you've been to FanFest, you can attest to this. Everyone in Iceland seems to know what EVE Online is. There are some fun FanFest moments where we're waiting outside of like a bar, and the bouncers are like, "You guys don't look that you belong here," but they don't say anything, and they're like, "You're here for EVE, right?" And they just talk about like their EVE experience. It's absolutely great. But yeah, so the first one, super broken, fired through Sinos. There was actually a very neat story about how some of the first Titans died because there are no Hictors. There are only Dictors that could kill a bubble, and because the AoE Doomsday was so powerful. Essentially because of it was how AoE it was, you would essentially nano fit your Titan. This was after the Sino through the or Doomsday through the Sino thing got patched / fixed. You would jump into the system. Doomsday, you would have a timer before you can warp, but you're aligning this whole time, and then you warp off. Your Doomsday killed all the interdiction bubbles, and you warped off too quick for another bubble to be like an anchor bubble to be deployed. So you were pretty much immune. Some of these people kind of felt no fear. Some of the ideas that EVE players came up with to kill these things were bumping the Titan to bump them out of alignment. If you've ever heard the Evil Thug video killing a Titan, one of the first Titans in EVE, you just hear this Russian guy yelling "Bam Peem" over and over again. One of my favorites. It's definitely like an EVE memory you'll remember forever, especially a lot of the people that were involved in that one will not forget. But a very, very clever pilot by the name of Black Horizon came up with an idea where he can get some of the high-end shield hardeners, like officer shield hardeners, throw them on a flycatcher, and you could actually tank it. If you overheat it just right, you could tank it so much that your ship will not die after one Doomsday cycle, specifically from a rag, because it would fire an explosive one. So you just jack up this one flycatcher with untold amounts of ISK. At the time, it was completely nuts to put so much money on such a small ship. But it was tanky enough to just barely survive in structure after a doomsday, and then he'd go in and launch the bubble. And that's how a lot of the early Titans were killed, using like one of these mechanics.
Because
like
a little later after that, like people started to like tank their battleships specifically to be able to absorb a single doomsday. But when those organizations came, ended up having 2 Titans, it was kind of like game over there in that regard, right?
The double doomsday.
Yeah. So a lot of early Eve warfare, if you looked at some of the old kill mails, obviously they're not the same now, but you have essentially just APOCs and sniper battleships with tons of plates on them so they could survive 1 or 2 doomsdays. And then the meta became 3 doomsdays. And then after that war, the winning side took their gargantuan force of 20-something Titans and ended up doomsdaying a carrier just to show how overwhelmingly overpowered this was going to be and how big of a problem it was going to be. And then that's when the AoE Doomsday got nerfed into a focused one. But yeah, some history of the Titan Doomsday for you. It's really fun. Eve was super, super broken back in the day if you had one.
Yeah. That's what made them desirable. They were broken. They were overpowered. They were supposed to be rare. They were supposed to be group assets for an alliance, not just a corporation. And yeah, it's like saying, look, in World War II, the tank came around, which was an astonishing, overpowered thing. And in 2020, everybody has a tank or 2 or 3 in their garage. It's a whole different scale of...
And if you were playing back then, it's like an indelible moment sealed in your memory forever when you killed a Titan, right? So like those moments were so few and far between. Now it happens regularly, pretty much. And you're like, Titan died, whatever, NBD. But back then it was like, holy shit, guys, I killed this Titan. And you talked about it for weeks. It got just annoying. Yeah. And then even better is when your Titan almost died but lived. I remember there's this fellow named Tortoken in PL. And he had an avatar, and avatars were kind of shitty back then because everyone wanted the levies or the Ragnaroks because they could align faster. They had more low slots. But he got caught and almost died, and he was boating for so long in a certain direction he broke the grid, and he ended up on a grid with no bubbles and instantly warped in like structure. And it was, if you could talk to him now, he would still bring that story up. Every single time you talked to him, he would bring that story up, and it was insufferable to a point, but it was also just showed like how important this little thing was to him.
Yeah, and Carneros has a great story of and during the Fountain War, his Titan was one of the last ones out, I think, and got caught destroyed, and how he really bonded with that memory. It's still very present in his mind. And it is interesting that ships don't really exist until they die. So that's another aspect, right? Now it's memorialized. Now you can say that it actually did exist. Anyway, so that's the Titan. Happy birthday, 15 years old. Okay, guys, last part of the program today is CCP had a fireside chat. Caleb, you were watching that. Oh, he's gone. We were watching that live when it happened, and then we had a little post-reaction stream. But I want to get your guys' opinions. What'd you guys hear on there that was interesting? Or if you want to just talk about CCP and their development for the year, we can talk about that.
I think if with the story I just told about how the Titans would be these indelible moments when one died, I think Hilmar, especially if he had a magic wand, he would want to go back to those times. That's the part of Eve that he likes. Every time I hear him talk about Eve, he really loves the idea of loss, and or rather the idea of a loss being significant. So yeah, every time I hear him talk, that's what comes to mind. And I think he would like to go back there.
Yeah, he thinks the magic is in the destruction. He says that exact words. The magic's in the destruction. What do you think he means by that?
I mean, similar to like what you had mentioned and what Carnero says about like the Titan, the ship doesn't die until it explodes. So the story is really not written until you feel an excruciating loss over this. And I don't know if this is an Icelandic thing or just specifically because Eve has been this way before, where when you get a loss, you don't just shrug it off. You run you're on the gamut of emotions. Right? You're like, you get mad, then you're like, well, I can get it back, and then you finally get to the acceptance stage, and then perhaps you join a group where you can inflict that pain onto someone else, right? So he likes the idea of EVE Online, or at least he appears to like the idea of EVE Online, where a loss is a very visceral feeling. It's not just it's not like CSGO or something where you die and you just wait 5 minutes for the round to start again. He likes the idea where, you create this thing in the world almost like a child, and then it dies and you're just broken for a while. And I just love that that's his view.
Like, the thing about EVE Online that makes it different than a lot of other MMOs is that when you die, the ship that you were in is gone. Like, if you play like World of Warcraft, you die, you run back to your body, everything is the same. You play Final Fantasy 14, you die, it's fine, you wake up, you're back as you were. Older space MMOs, Earth and Beyond, you die and you wait till your ship gets repaired by somebody or you get towed back to a station, you're fine. EVE Online, the ship's gone. You have to get a new ship, and that is something that a lot of the newest players have trouble with in the game, because they're just like, they want to build up this ship. They see this ship as what they are, and they build up the ship and they put effort into the ship, and then it's just gone, right? And that can be hard for some people until you start to get into that mindset where like ships are ammo. It's not my character. This is an ammo. This Harbinger is an ammo. This carrier is ammo. And a lot of what makes EVE is because of that aspect of your ship is gone when you die.
There's actual risk when you go and engage with things.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be that way even in like EVE Online's always had like really harsh penalties, but even in like really old school MMOs, used to lose like experience for the next level or things like that, right? It wasn't until like World of Warcraft really that sort of like got rid of a lot of the like loss on death stuff.
Well, something like Ultima Online had lost, like you'd lose the items you were in, and Final Fantasy 11, not 14, had EXP loss. But I guess EVE Online and Ultima Online are similar, but I can't think of anything else that is. Because you lost your items in Ultima Online.
What's interesting is, and I keep bringing this game up because to me it's a watershed game. It's a masterpiece of a video game. It's not EVE, although that is too. It is Death Stranding. And what's interesting about Death Stranding is it takes the same kind of connection to other players, but it basically says, we're going to remind you what it's like to be good to another player. And we only give you those choices. You can really only interact with people in a positive way. And that game is so beautiful and uplifting. It's dangerous because the environment's dangerous. The journey's dangerous. But in every aspect of the game, it is reminding you of kindness and cooperation. That seems to be the exact opposite of what EVE Online wants you to do. So why is there magic on both sides of that?
I mean, there is a certain like very coolness where you're in this unforgiving dystopian world where everyone's trying to kill you and take your livelihood. And if you can find another person or find a group of players, the amount of stuff that you can achieve and what you can accomplish is astounding, right? So building those social interactions in spite of everything seeming the world wanting you to die is a pretty cool thing as well. And I think that's where a lot of the beauty does come in EVE Online.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so that was one of the things that Hilmar said was like the destruction makes people team up to fend off destruction. And so people basically get together to protect themselves, but they also get together to be aggressive towards their goals, which is why you see wars. And what's interesting about this last war, I know we talked about it for the first hour, but this is not a war to gain anything. It's a war for future. It's a war for the future of influence. So they're not really fighting over territory. They're fighting over permission on who can actually be a player on the board when people go to war. That's interesting. It's a little meta. Okay, other stuff that was said during that. I'll just run down these and we can comment on them when I'm done. Okay, so it'll never be a Jove expansion. 1.9 million players actually logged into EVE for the first time this year. That's more than all 3 years prior combined. So definitely a lot of new players coming in and testing the waters. EVE is the best video game, according to Hilmar, because it rewards what video games reward, which is decision-making influences the direction. And that's like entertainment. You're watching a passive movie. The director is directing your attention through the movie, through the narrative. Books, same thing. The author is directing your attention. And in video games, the attention is able to be influenced by the actual observer. They want to look this way, they want to look that way, they want to do this or that. And MMOs specifically allow you in a sandbox setting to do any direction you want. And EVE Online really rewards the decision making. The bigger the decision, the worse the mistake, but also the greater the actual result. Japanese and Korean, Chinese players, they interface complexity, whereas Westerners kind of want the interface to get out of their way, I guess. 2022 will be the next Fan Fest. That's because of COVID. And in 2023, they're going to have their 20-year anniversary for the game. A couple more things here. Natural generation is what populated EVE Online. So they essentially took different empires, they carved up different languages, they made a program, wasn't AI, but it was an algorithm, to take different I'll call them dialects, languages, and generate artificially these words. And that's how Amarian empires have a certain flavor to them. Sorry, Amarian system names. Yeah, system names.
Ilex.
And then,
Devil.
Yeah, I'm sure CCP put their names on a few systems because you can see
CCP TAC US.
You can see definitely the Hillmart system. There's other ones too. I don't think those were accidents. And Kaldari have a different style of name, etc. But that was like a generation that seemed very natural. And one thing that he laments is that they're not able to regenerate EVE Online. So the world isn't able to evolve on its own or reconstitute on its own, which is why things are so static in this world. But there's just not the technology to do that, at least back then when they started. And finally, the philosophy of EVE Online is impermanence. Impermanence, not impertinence. It's maybe that too. But impermanence has a law to it that everything is destructible. And so there's nothing that is permanent. And so there are certain things that run against that theory, that law, and that is like asset safety, not being able to lose all your stuff. NPC factories not being able to be destroyed. SOB system itself isn't based on just block this gate, don't let anybody through. It's based on a system of things you have to do. And all these things are regrettable or lamentable because EVE's desire is to be a complete sandbox where players decide things and have access to influence one another by taking things away and setting back your opponent. So that was that. And the final thing, this was the biggest one actually, was cloaky camping is still unresolved. And it looks like they may resolve it in early next year. I don't know if you guys heard. That was a comment that came later, but
yeah, that was kind of like a weird one for me because Hilmar was mentioning that like through all the events that they had through the Invasion World Tour and everything, they kind of made a mental note of the major gripes that players had, and he was like, "Yeah, the only one left to address is the cloaky camping one." I'm sure there might have been others on that list, but the cloaky camping, it does. He mentioned, Hilmar himself mentioned that like he didn't quite get what that represented. And of course, that started a nice debate over on every EVE medium ever. about what is cloaky camping good, is cloaky camping broken. Obviously, the low-hanging fruit is, just make liquid ozone work the thing. But then there are people that have pretty actually solid arguments arguing against it. So that's going to be a mess. Whenever that comes, people are going to be very passionate one way or the other. One of the things that stood out to me was CCP Burger had mentioned this, and this has been CCP's kind of MO for the last 24 months almost. And that's and it's for better or worse. Just try things out. Just see what happens. Do something. See what happens. Gather the data. I'm taken back to Eve North in Toronto. Mm-hmm. I got the chance to interview CCP Burger for TIS, and he had mentioned, he's like, yeah, I used to work in hardware where if you make a mistake, the physical thing breaks. And then like you're in trouble, you're fired. You can't go back and just fix it. And this is kind of an abridged thing because it's been so long ago now, almost 2 years, a year and a half. And he said with EVE Online, it's beautiful because, hey, you can try something out. There will be implications, right? So you have to be careful with what you try out. You can't just go and flip switches willy-nilly, but you don't break the thing, right? You can gather data to see what it does, what it means, and the effect it has, and then you can make an informed decision on changes you want to make. And you can really see like that philosophy going through the rest of CCP, where they're more willing to tinker with switches, make a big change, a big sweeping change, and then iterate on it a few weeks later, like we saw with the dynamic bounty system and things like that. So they're much more empowered as a company, I think, to make changes and to tinker with the inner workings. And I think a lot of that does have to come down to, that philosophy. And also there is some amount of, financial stability now for the game because they are owned by Pearl Abyss. They don't have to worry about appeasing certain investors and things like that. They don't have to worry about the bottom line. They don't have to worry about, hey, if we run a deficit, do we have to fire people now? They've got a little bit more financial security to be those developers that they were at the start of the game, where they didn't know what to expect. So they did lots of random stuff, not random stuff, but they did lots of stuff.
It must have been really hard on a CEO to have to cut 100 jobs, like that must feel terrible, like legitimately.
Yeah. Hilmar, I mean, I was on the CSM during the Incarna phase where they laid off a bunch of people. You could just see, you can go back and watch those interviews. He is a completely different person. I don't want to say a broken person, but you can see that those decisions did not weigh lightly on him. He was like just complete. He's almost unrecognizable if you look at those interviews and see him now.
Yeah, he was entirely deflated like back then, but like he's so full of energy and drive for the game, like these days.
Yeah, and that's good to see because the players do have like this touch and go relationship with the developers occasionally, and I think the baseline is cautious optimism. Like, you guys are kind of crazy. What are you gonna do now? Like, what are you gonna break now? What are we gonna have to deal with now? But it definitely does seem like we've turned that corner where 3 or 4 years ago it was you guys are constantly making mistakes to now where it's you guys are messing with the sauce a lot, but going to give you a little bit of leniency here to see what goes on. And obviously that's not the case for everything, but it does definitely seem like that's the dynamic we're at now, which is, I think, honestly, very healthy.
I think everything changed when the financial considerations changed for CCP. Like the whole strategy, I think, changed at that point. So say what you want. I know Graf Elkin famously quit. He's back, but he quit when a Korean company bought CCP because he thought maybe that, like others thought, not just him, but a lot of people thought, we're going to see this turn into a cash grab for, and it's going to go into the ground or whatever. That didn't happen. And if you listen to what was being said at the time, Black Desert Online is very similar to EVE Online. They have similarities. They want to work together and kind of co-create and use the best parts of what the best parts discovered in one game over to another, and same with EVE Online changing. Do you have something to say, Arsia?
I don't think they're similar at all. I don't think the games could be more different, Black Desert Online and EVE Online.
But aren't they both sandbox style MMOs?
Black Desert Online is kind of like an EverQuest. To me, it rings like an EverQuest style MMO where you have like a class and you do the missions that it tells you to do, and it's kind of like that. Like,
okay,
it doesn't ring anything. Like EVE is like, here's a world, go figure out what you're good at and what you like doing, have fun, bye.
Right. There's no book involved. I get what you're saying, but there seem to be some players actually. I'm thinking of Gevlin Goblin went to Black Desert Online because he says he went to go conquer that marketplace because I
tried to play Black Desert Online, and like the entire game seems to be trying to advertise to me, and I hate it. And like I can't like get into character, and I can't care about anything in the game because it's like you're sitting in town, and it's like you try to like take the atmosphere of the town, but the atmosphere is please buy this, buy that, and buy the other thing. Thanks, with the real money, by the way.
Yeah. It did make $1 billion, so it must be working on some level over there.
It's working, but not for me.
Right. I get you. Well, so the idea was now you have a kindred spirit in it with you that maybe you don't have to fire 100 guys because Incarna doesn't work. You know, maybe you don't have to slash, your company because Dust doesn't work. A game that's not even related to EVE Online, or Valkyrie doesn't work.
Did you hear the new CCP shooter, EVE Online Universe shooter, is being developed apparently?
Yeah, haven't we known that? That's why I'm surprised.
No, because they scrapped the last project, and this is a new one that was just announced.
Yeah, they said that they kind of scrapped the last project, but they had various different job openings for a new game in like being developed in London. That was quite some time ago. At least now, like, there is an official thing from Hilmar kind of saying that, like, that particular style of game is being worked on. So it kind of confirms everyone's suspicions, which is nice.
Yeah, they've had job openings for their London studio for what is described as this is like an ambitious online shooter RPG thing. So they've been hiring positions for that for the last few years, and a lot of the Project Legion devs actually didn't get like laid off when the project got cancelled. They got moved over to EVE for a year or so, and then they moved back, or they stayed on EVE. So,
they kept them busy. Yeah, it just seems to me like the worst kept secret, but it isn't. I guess official news came out about it. That seems to be.
You think we'll be orbital bombarding again? Like, that was a blast from the past.
Interesting concept.
They got all the orbital ammo.
Yeah, I think unless you have like 100 million people playing EVE Online, you can't really do that kind of thing because you need a 24-hour population that's interested, and there's too few people in EVE Online interested in too many different things. So there's no threshold that you can pass.
One of the interesting things that they mentioned is that and you talked about it as well, the number of people trying EVE Online.
Yeah.
The fact that this is a almost 20-year-old game and they can still get 1 million people to give it a shot. And
2 million.
Put some new bodies in there. I think that's interesting. Also, Riot announced that they're developing an MMO. So maybe MMOs will be like in vogue again, and EVE Online will hit like new surges in popularity after more people get involved with MMOs.
It does feel, and it could be COVID, but it does feel like video games have hit a new plateau. I think they're going to go higher than they were in 2013, which was their last peak. If you look at all graphs, right, you look at EVE Online's PC or whatever, and they're like, oh, the good old days of 2013. Yeah, it was like that for everybody. That was the peak of MMOs in general, because you had first player games that were so open world that you got that same sensation without having to subscribe.
With COVID, MMOs give you a chance to be social and go do things with people because you can't do anything with anyone. And I think COVID does play a big part in it.
Yeah. But it is COVID. It may be the long-lasting implications of social media. Video games, especially MMOs, are a social media. Here we are being social, talking about the game, but also inside the game as you're chatting to one another, as you're cooperatively working on a thing. That's all social media. And video games in general are social medias. So it seems like that is, if MMOs in some way could have stuck around to be popular again, it seems like that is a distinct possibility, Elise. And I think, let's face it, EVE Online at almost 20 years now could see a resurgence, especially if you're still generating a ton of interest, which they are. Here's the one thing I wanted to point out, Elise, and you guys, where our PCU is actually kind of staying steady or kind of dipping a little bit. And that tells me that, I don't know, I was thinking that the PCU only represents how many players are logging in at the exact same time, but it also represents the population. It doesn't tell you who the population is. So are we getting enough new players to offset all the people that are quitting because of the resource changes?
It also doesn't tell you how many of them are Elise's alt.
So CCB says, especially CCB Goodfellow, whenever he's on one of the CCB TV broadcasts, this question comes, and it's more directly to him because I think he's the brand manager. I think that's his official title. And he says, yeah, new players are in fact replacing a lot of the older players that are coming in. So that's a good sign. That's not something that they're worried about. Obviously, if they were worried about it, they probably wouldn't tell us. But they did like show graphs of like new accounts in terms of their retention. They're sticking around longer, and they're like staying throughout the year. Whether it's a COVID effect or not, who knows? They're definitely still in the game.
Foghill wants to know, are they doing anything meaningful? That's the question. And that's my point. And they brought this up. I think Berger said it too. As new players come into the game, they're not the same old survivor biased, nullsec is the only game in town, go right to it. Those are not who's coming to the game. And I think you're seeing a growing popularity of diversity of things to do. I think that Ashtarothi and I discussed this about a year and a half ago, where we're like, it looks to me, looking into the future, CCP is kind of done with these veterans that hang around the game and just kind of poo-poo it when they don't get development going in their direction. Like, they're kind of done with them. They want a whole new crop of players. You could see the excitement when they went to Finland and had that at-home fan fest.
Yeah.
It just seemed like a different vibe, and they talked about that on this fireside as well. Like, when they went around the world, there were different subcultures of EVE players and different emphasis in different parts of the world. And I kind of got the feeling that world tour showed them there's demand for EVE, but it's not the typical US or West demand for nullsec, empire building, or nullsec nomadic mercenary destroying each other. There's like a whole ecosystem of players out there that they could build on. And I think that's who they want to populate the next generation of EVE Online.
Yeah, because they've definitely gotten to the point where they realize that this game is so old, they need another generation, right? We're right now, we're the boomers on our way out the door. We can't invest the same amount of time into the games as young professionals and like older
College
people
students
in general, right? So, and I do get that vibe, and that's one of the things they are very careful when they address, and
Not to
rightfully
say.
so, because they are not going to come out and say we don't care about veterans. I think that if you could be a fly on the wall in some of these meetings, and they're like, well, we don't really have to. We need these veterans to hang around a little bit longer. Well, we need them to hold the bridge while the new clan like walk over. That's like the curse. but at the end of the day, they don't have to bend over backwards to make sure we don't leave, which kind of sucks, because I feels like, and I know a lot of veterans feel the same way, that we put this game on the map, we wrote the stories, but EVE Online is the storybook. It is the thing that writes the stories, whether we're here or not. So I don't know. I'm very much of two minds when this comes out, because I do get the view that they don't care about the veterans all that much, or they're not as focused on veteran retention as getting new people into the game.
New people are good for us too. New people in our fleets, new people in our corps alliances. For a lot of us who fly outside of Null, new people in our areas of space, and new people in Null too, of course.
Yeah, but we like to think, and I speak as e-veterans, we like to think that we've stuck around through the thick and the thin, and maybe these new players are a little bit more fickle, right? So if CCP does like a weird...
We were new players once, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we stood the test of time. We proved that we deserve to be here and be listened to.
And if they stay, they also deserve to be here.
Yeah, but the point is they're going to leave. When things get tough, they're going to leave.
If we're not dicks to them, they won't leave. Like
no. Here's the thing: we have to be dicks. We have to be
the right kind of dicks, where we blow them up and tell them how they got caught. Right?
You have to build up new players rather than bash them down. The survivorship bias just is not going to equate to a long-term good EVE Online, and I definitely think they're on the right track of kind of figuring out why people are staying rather than why people have stayed.
Well, listen, this is... Oh, go ahead.
So I know an alliance called Phoenix Naval Systems, and the primary way they recruit people is they're like a high and low sec mercenary alliance. So the primary way they recruit people is they kill them and then they convo them and be like, and if the person is like ragey and like, it's like, okay, bye. If the person's not, like, most of the time the question is, how did you catch me? And they tell them about D-Scan, they tell them about whatever happened, and they usually then take this person, if they're looking for a group, under their wing and into the corp, and they teach them. And that's kind of what you have to do. It's like, don't pull the punches, but then try to help them learn.
Killing is a means of recruiting. That's interesting. All right, so Talking in Stations also saw the future, saw the writing on the wall, and that's why we're constantly looking for talent from all aspects of EVE Online. We're looking for new players that do different things in this sandbox, of course. And we don't focus only on nullsec, but of course that is our primary experience set. So that's what we get. But of course, diversifying our portfolio is essential to covering this game properly. It's not the same people talking about the same aspects of the game and just what the latest gossip is. It's about getting into the stories of the people who are doing other things besides nullsec. And that is why, if you have a chance, you should subscribe to our newspaper, which we publish in-game, so the news gets to you. And you can share it. If you're already a part of that newspaper, you can share it with other people inside the game so they don't have to go into the meta to find out what's going on. So all we do is post news that players are up to and sometimes what announcements CCP have made, but we try to focus on what players are doing, not what CCP is doing. And to do that, open up your mail, and at the bottom left, you'll see subscribe to a mail list, and you want to subscribe to TIS News. All right, there's the plug. Thanks, everybody. That's solid 2 hours of our Christmas, Christmas holiday party. I want to thank all of you, of course, Arsia and Suitonia, Hateless, of course, Elise and Maccloud. Also, Caleb was here earlier. But also want to say thank you to all of the staff at TIS. There's 43 of us, including moderators, content creators, content managers. This is the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole organization behind what you see here. And we're constantly looking for news. And we will actually, in January, start recruiting for Talking in Stations to bring in new faces as well. We are so blessed to have really incredible, talented people that you see here. and again, also behind the scenes. But we're always looking for new talent with new perspectives and that sort of stuff. Thanks, everybody, for watching today and watching all year long in 2020. We'll be back next week when we review the entire year and talk about Eve's most influential and give away those awards. Okay, thanks. That's all for us today. We will see you next week on Talking End Stations.